listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
And welcome to the GM Shuffle here on a Monday, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. I'm Dave Ross alongside our GM, Mark Dominik. And Mark, boy, wild card weekend has been wild. We saw a lot of unders, a lot of lower scoring games maybe than people anticipated. And we saw why home field advantage seems to be so important in the NFL postseason. As you well know, only one dog, or at least we did have a favorite that lost in the Chargers. They were road favorites, but the Commanders going on the road on Sunday night and beating Tampa Bay. What's your takeaway from that game, which definitely felt like the marquee game out of the 5 this weekend?
Well, the takeaway would be is that that's what makes the National Football League special. You get one shot at this bad boy to win, and in 60 minutes when the clock hits 0, you either win or lose. You either practice the next day or you pack the next day. And it's so different than NHL, NBA, Major League Baseball, anything like that. That's what makes the NFL so great. That's what makes so much pressure, but it also makes it so rewarding when you actually get to experience it. That game last night was a great game, a great matchup. Two teams played each other first week of the regular season, now in the postseason. The unfortunate thing for Tampa is the mistakes in the fourth quarter. I mean, it was pretty obvious what they did. They do the fumble, they give the Commanders the ball in the red zone 2 times in a row, and the Commanders go for it both times on fourth down to connect. And then in a simple sneak where they have a chance to chew up the clock and probably end with a touchdown, they miscalculate and they misfire, and it costs them a huge opportunity. So it's just a couple things that they're going to sit there and scratch their head, because they were certainly good enough to be in that game and win that game. They were for a while. So, a good competitive game. Excited for Jaden Daniels. Certainly excited for the Commanders. It's a big win. I mean, you think about how long it's been since their postseason win. Sadly, I was part of their last postseason win back in Tampa in 2005 on the wrong side of it. So Washington and Tampa, not a great place to be, I guess.
Yeah, you and I were both there that day in much different capacities, by the way, as a much younger scribe that back in those days, covering it for DC when they were still known as the Redskins. And yeah, you hadn't won a playoff game in 19 years as an organization. And it feels like in year 1 for Dan Quinn, I'm still kind of, it still doesn't really, it's taken me a while to process 12 wins in the regular season. And now you add on that 13th win here in the postseason. I know they're going to go to Detroit. I know they're the big underdog, but are people almost forgetting that they did, in fact, win 12 games in the regular season? We know how hard that's to do, whether it's with a first-year head coach, a second-time head coach in Dan Quinn, and certainly a first year and a rookie quarterback in Jaden Daniels.
I think it's because of the way they won, right? You think about their last 5 games have been the last play of the game. Whether it's the donk to beat the Bucks, where he hits the upright somehow and it just goes the right direction for the Commanders. But the last 4 weeks before that, it's been the last play of the game where they made the touchdown throw or whatever they need to get done. And so I think you kind of lost a little bit of the 12-win moxie. I think it's been great. It's certainly been a good high for the Commanders, for the whole organization, for everybody. Coach Quinn, who is really loved throughout the National Football League by players and coaches alike. So it's great to see that happen for him. They're going to run into a brick wall, I think, in Detroit. I don't think that's going to be very much fun as it is right now in that building, but you get to go play. And now you're final 8, your final 4 in your division, final 8 in the conference, or overall, I should say. That's a great place to be when you realize how hard it is to get to the dance. And now you're within the final 8 teams out of 32 of them.
Yeah, that's the amazing part, right? You still got a puncher's chance. It might not be a great chance on paper going to Detroit as the number 1 seed, and they're waiting for you there and getting healthier too. So it's going to be a daunting task, but they still at least have the opportunity to go there. The Packers' opportunity for this season has been snuffed out. They lose to Philadelphia 22-10 is the final there. Jordan Love, maybe not his best day either as quarterback yesterday in Philadelphia. And maybe a day that was gettable for the Eagles. And, the opening kickoff, which I felt like, I don't know how they don't overturn that. We saw the late blatant pass interference. They don't call that. And the interception, it's a 12-point game at that point. But it felt like a play here and a play there, Mark. It could have been a different result yesterday in Philadelphia.
Well, I think you're right. You take the first kickoff, like you said, and there's some aerial shots now that you're starting to see today that it's a pretty clear recovery for the Green Bay Packers. And for them to not flip it and get it wrong, and then let alone, this game happens fast.
Yeah.
But the hit that Oren Burks put on him was a completely illegal hit. I mean, it's helmet to helmet straight on. I mean, I can't believe there wasn't a flag. That's when I first saw it, I was like, ooh, flag. Then the ball, I'm like, oh, ball. You know, that's the way my mind was thinking of it. And the flag didn't come out. And then you look at it and they're like, no, it's Philly's ball. Look, bad things happen. They missed a field goal. You know, that's the first field goal I think they've missed in the postseason as well. So you think for the kicker. And so you think, boy, there's a lot of points that were within margin. I thought they fought and clawed really hard. I think if you're a Packers fan today, you felt like, man, we did have opportunities to win this game. And they tried to keep Saquon Barkley in check, only 120 yards. So I guess that's a pretty good job. But, 22-10, it felt closer than that all game long. And it felt like, this Packer team really learned a lot from this game. And adversity was part of it. And sadly, it didn't go their way. But I would say to everyone in Appleton, Wisconsin, obviously in Green Bay and the surrounding areas, Milwaukee, et cetera, I would feel very confident that we have a really good scheme here. We have the right offensive coordinator. We have the right defensive coordinator. Yeah. And we just learned a whole season worth of knowledge that I think is just going to parlay into 2025. So, I mean, I love the Packers for 2025. It's a team that you've got to think is going to make the postseason and certainly should be able to compete against Detroit and Minnesota. I think they're going to be at that level. This is a very young team. Very young team. Very exciting to see it. Yes. Would I have liked Jordan Love to have played better? Yes. Have I seen Jordan Love play better? Yes. But, you go on the road, and that's why you want to be the home team. And adversity starts to hit. And sometimes, a couple little things, you start to press or start to push a little bit, and you end up with 3 interceptions.
Yeah, and again, I don't want anybody out there to watch this and think, oh, my goodness, you guys are just harping on the opening play. I mean, it flips the game. It's 90 seconds in. You're down 7-0 on a play that was clear. I'm watching that in real time. I go, well, they're going to reverse it because they've got replay. That's why you have replay. Like, Mark, that's the one part. And again, I've got no stake in the game. I'm not on those sidelines or anything like that. I want it to be fair. I want it to be even. And I'm sure that, if you're looking at that today, if you're Gutekunst and, certainly you're going to be going, how did you not overturn that? Like, is that something that will be addressed? I don't know what else you can do to address it. I thought that's why we have replay, to address a clear recovery by the Packers.
Yeah, you know what? This is the great feeling. You get to fill out that form, send it up to 345 on the officiating form, and you say, hey, look, I think you missed this call. And then you get the form back. It's like, yeah, I think we did, and we're out of the playoffs. Great, thanks. But that's it. I mean, that's where it is. I think it's worth the time to make sure you get it right. I think that's the thing. The NFL sometimes is so worried about length of game. I mean, every owner's meeting every year. It's like, okay, well, what's the average length of game? 3 hours and 2 minutes and 13 seconds. Great, it's 10 seconds less. As if Americans can't focus for 20 more seconds or 2 more minutes to make sure the call's right. I mean, they're very worried, and I get it. It's methodical, cameras, timeouts, advertising, all those different things are part of the recipe here. But that was bad. That was a bad look for the National Football League. It was a missed call. And again, the Eagles are a really good football team. Yep. And the Eagles are going to have a great opportunity this next week versus the winner of the game tonight to keep moving forward, because that wasn't Jalen Hurts' best performance. It wasn't a bad one. But, it's going to be hard to find somebody, I think, that's going to play as good a defense, I think, that the Packers did to really limit the explosive plays from the Eagles yesterday.
Couple things there. To the victory go the spoils, and the Eagles do move on. They await, as you mentioned, the winner tonight of the Rams in the Vikings game. We saw A.J. Brown reading on the sideline, and I didn't. I was like, I've never seen that before. You mentioned Jalen Hurts. We had Rich Gannon on by the books with us on Monday on VSiN, and he said, boy, my concern will be if they get behind a little bit, and you have to really rely on the passing game. Is that not as big a concern for you, Mark? And look, Jalen was coming off a concussion, and he had a couple weeks off, and maybe it was a longer healing process than we thought. Could we chalk it up to that, to the layoff, and hope that maybe this week he looks like he's back more to being the Jalen Hurts that could have been the MVP just a couple of years ago?
Yeah, because you got to think in concussion protocol, you're not really on the field. You're not throwing the ball. You're not walking around. So you're not as sharp maybe as you could be. I don't want to put too much on it. I think I want to give credit to the Packers defense, but I also want to say that I think I'd be scared if Jalen Hurts can beat you in the air. He can. I think he can do that. I think that with A.J. Brown and in company, that's a very scary thought. But I mean, I know this offense runs through the legs of those two players, Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts. But Jalen could beat you through the air. I don't want to think of him as a non-passing quarterback. He's he's more than adequate, more than adept to be able to be a great passer in this league. And I think that they've got that, hopeful combination coming. I'm trying to think if I'm, the Vikings or the Rams, what book do I want to try to hand over to A.J. Brown? Something just pregame as a joke, some kind of a terrible title that would be just like, it's the end of the birds or something. I don't know what I'd come up with, but by the end of the week, I'm sure there's a book, and I'm sure there'll be people out there that have come up with many a meme that'll make sense of what A.J. Brown was doing. But if it helps him focus, and again, if you watched it, it wasn't like his teammates were all like, what are you doing? It looks like it's something he's been doing for a while.
Well, the birds, Alfred Hitchcock, that scared the bejesus out of me as a kid. So maybe that would be apropos. Give him that. That thing was creepy. We mentioned the Rams and the Vikings are going to play tonight, Monday Night Football. If you gave, Howie Roseman, if you gave Nick Sirianni, Vic Fangio, Kellen Moore, you gave them truth serum and said, which team do we really want to prepare less for? Which team do we want to prepare more for? Who do you think in their heart of hearts, they'd rather play next week?
I think they'd rather play the Rams. And I think because I think they can get after Stafford, and I think because the Rams are dealing with so much logistically and mentally, let alone obviously having to go to Arizona, the fires that are still going on, but then short week, turn around, get on a flight all the way across the country on an extra day less. All those things I say, I guess I'd rather have a Rams team that might be a little bit more mentally or physically fried a little bit than the Minnesota team, who I think if they win this game, that Detroit game is already distant memory. And it's like, let's go. We're a brand new team, brand new season. And we really kind of help, I think, Minnesota kind of, be more of a juggernaut or more of a danger, I think, in the next matchup. So I got to think they're thinking internally. I think they'd rather play the Rams.
Yeah, and we'll see tonight again. The Vikings 2.5-point favorites here in neutral field, as this game, of course, is going to be played in Arizona tonight with the wildfires going on in LA. We hope everybody back there in LA. And you mentioned it, Mark. I don't know. It is hard to compartmentalize football to real life, and those players, those coaching staffs, they are all affected by it. Whatever is still going on back home as they try to play the biggest game of the year so far for the Rams, obviously in Wild Card Weekend. Okay, when we come back, let's flip it over to the AFC side, see the results there, and what it portends for next week. That's next here on the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
We continue the GM Shuffle. Dave Ross and Mark Dominik here, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. And Mark, let's flip it over to the AFC side now. We get the matchup that we all really do wanted. We wanted to watch, right? Buffalo against Baltimore. That's going to happen. Everybody wants to see it. How'd we get there? Buffalo was actually down 7-0. Bo Nix and Denver, they come right out. Big touchdown pass. First drive of the game. You go, oh, my goodness, maybe this is going to be in jeopardy. Not really. 31-7 the rest of the way. 31 unanswered for Buffalo to get the job done here. What's the takeaway in this? Is it I was a little surprised by Buffalo's approach. I felt like they kept Denver in the game actually pretty long with the running game and kind of time-consuming drives, but didn't knock them out until that third quarter. Could we see a similar style against Baltimore, play keep away, which worked certainly against Denver?
Mildly, I think. I mean, I think with, you talk about the running game and the problem there. We're not going to be in the same problem with the Denver Broncos as we are with the Baltimore Ravens. And Dominik ran the ball, pretty effectively yesterday when he decided to tuck it and run it, which is scary for the Bills also. It's a little concerning across the board, but, I feel like the Bills were just, I think that was the nerves. Like, this is a team that had expectations, and it was 7-0. You're like, whoa, we're on our heels a little bit. It just took them a little bit of time, I think, to finally get back into the groove of like, okay, we scored. Okay, we're in good shape. But the game was kind of close and kind of just hanging around. And then they just kind of blew the doors off as the second half, like you talked about, kind of came through. And they just were consistent, right? There's a team that, consistently controlled the clock, consistently ran the football, were able to make the throws, had some big, the big fourth down touchdown play out of Josh Allen, the conversions with Josh Allen. So they were just, the second half, it felt like it was two different teams. The first half, you're like, okay, this is a good little battle we got going here. But the Buffalo Bills have been a team that I feel have been on a march since the beginning of the season, even from the end of last year. Look, we get to watch a matchup. If it's not the Super Bowl, it's I know it's called a divisional playoff game. It sure feels like a lot more than that. If you told me in a couple of weeks these two teams would meet up in the Super Bowl, I'd be not surprised one bit at all. So, we get to see some tremendous games, but none better, I think, than this Buffalo Ravens matchup.
It does feel like not that long ago, divisional round, same deal. Josh Allen going to Arrowhead, and we saw that classic matchup, 13 seconds, and Mahomes gets it done, and we all forget that wasn't to go to the Super Bowl. That was the divisional round, wasn't even the AFC title game, and I'm with you. It does feel like the de facto pseudo AFC title game before you play Kansas City, if Kansas City can get by Houston next week as well. This was supposed to be a step back year for Buffalo. They haven't taken a step back at all, right? And so you lose Stephon Diggs, and how are they ever going to make up for that loss, right? And then you get Matt Milano back. Von Miller feels like he's turned back the hands of time a little bit. How has Sean McDermott been able to make this Buffalo team, dare I say, better than the one a year ago?
I think he looked at the locker room. I think he and Brandon Beane have had a very similar mindset of like, what do we want the locker room to look like? What kind of person and players do we want when we're huddled up in practice on the road together? And I think that they felt like they really wanted to clean the locker room up and insert the right type of people into the program. It's amazing to me that they've been this successful. And even going into the game, Amari Cooper catches, 2 balls for like 8 yards? It's like he's not even been a factor for this team. So if he factors in, that will be even more, icing on the cake. But I just think it's they know the type of person they want in the building. They're doing that. And when one person isn't quite in this same mold of what they're looking for, maybe they let them go or they trade them away. This is a Buffalo team, to your point, a lot of people were down on this year, and they have absolutely proven everyone wrong, and they've been really resilient. And I think the reason why people were wrong is I think Josh Allen had a very abnormal year last year. And this is more the normal Josh Allen that we've seen a couple of years before. So he just didn't have his best year either, and the whole team kind of felt that. Even though they had a good win-loss record, it wasn't the way that they thought the season was going to go.
Yeah, it feels like he's taking more care of the football this year, maybe last year, a little bit more reckless. This year, not as much. So he's avoided that big mistake that's plagued him sometimes in the past. Lamar Jackson, his playoff performances can be indifferent, right? Like he might be a 3-time MVP. We'll find out if it's him or Allen this year. But there's no denying how great he is in the regular season. Hasn't always translated in the postseason. It did in the first foray this year against the Steelers. He and Derrick Henry, I think they just ran it for 6 more yards against Pittsburgh. Unbelievable rushing performance in that win. What'd you make of that? Because he said, I get a little bit nervy, Lamar, like kind of those nerves of playing in a bigger game, feels it. You think we might see a different Lamar going forward after that initial foray against Pittsburgh?
I don't know how much different it'll be. Obviously he was very successful and very productive. That game just blew me away as you're watching it. The Baltimore Ravens just dominated the game. And the fact that you ran the ball 50 times on another NFL opponent is embarrassing. It's shocking that somebody would say, hey, look, I'm just going to run the ball down your throat all day and you can't do anything about it. And, that's what the Ravens did. And I don't know why you don't take I'm sure that's the same blueprint they want to take to Buffalo and sit there and say, hey, look, try to stop us. And every once in a while we're going to take shots. And maybe Zay Flowers is back, which, obviously would be a big piece, even more so for the Baltimore Ravens. So it'd be great to have Zay because, again, I just want to see teams fully healthy and out there playing. It's been nice to see like a Buffalo team that's healthy. Looks like Kansas City's fairly healthy. You talk about the AFC teams, and most of them are actually really good health right now, which is exciting because that's the way you want to get into the postseason to say, hey, look, whatever happens here happens. But, I think this Ravens team, Lamar Jackson, we're playing for the divisional round. Maybe the winner that finally gets the MVP because whoever wins this game, maybe shows that I am the MVP, even though in my mind it's Lamar and then Josh Allen just a little bit below, but it's been impressive to see this Baltimore run and the consistency out of this Baltimore team for years.
We know it's a regular season award, America. We understand that, but Mark's point's well taken. I wonder if they're like, hey, let's retabulate these votes after this game. Yeah, this will prove which ones. in the event of a tie, let's have this game be the deciding factor. By the way, that's the part I was most disappointed in watching the Steelers is that they ran the ball 50 times down your throat, stacked 10 in the box. Fine. If you beat me over the top, then so be like a Mike Tomlin-led team had no answer defensively. Like that not losing. You're just not good enough. I get it. But that really did surprise me, Mark. Really quickly, for the Steelers next year, is it going to look differently than it's looked down the stretch, losing 5 straight in that first-round exit?
I believe so. Again, I've got nothing against players or anything like that. but that's going to be a new running back in that room. The Pittsburgh Steelers have to address the running back, whether that's free agency, the draft, higher in the draft, or something. But they have got to get more explosive plays out of the running back room. It's just a fact. And Najee Harris is a very good, tough player. But, the reality is they keep going back to Jaylen Warren for a reason, and Najee Harris, they did pick up the fifth-year option for a reason. I think that's a big piece. I mean, obviously, you still want to see another wide receiver, be able to make plays. It was a shame this year, they drafted Roman Wilson and kind of never saw the field at all as a guy they thought was going to have a little more of an impact for their football team. So they'll be getting something like that back. But I think you got to add to it. You got to add a running back and another receiver for sure to get this Pittsburgh's offense moving like the rest of the National Football League is moving.
Yeah, it's funny because I was told years ago that, running was out, defense, stopping, all this. It's just going to be throw it all over the yard. That's the way you win in the new NFL. And then I look at Buffalo. How'd they get better? James Cook got a lot better, helped out Josh Allen in that run game. Philadelphia, all they do is run. Baltimore, that's what they do. They run it down your throats. Pittsburgh couldn't stop it. What's old is new again. And your good point about Pittsburgh. You better get old, back to the Franco Harris days, and start running the football like you did when you were winning multiple championships back in the 70s. The Texans ran it better. Yeah, it wasn't great, but they ran it better with Joe Mixon to kind of cap off that win against the Chargers. And what do the Chargers want to do? They want to run the football, and they couldn't. Is it, as simple as that when you dissect that game? That obviously the interceptions by Herbert stand out, but they really had no running game, and maybe that helped the Texans pressure him into those turnovers.
Yeah, I mean, Stroud has the one pick, but Herbert has 4. That's a big piece of when you're in the postseason, you're -3 in interceptions. No matter who you are, you're going to have a hard time winning that game. But I agree. I mean, I look at it that way. And then we talked about this, I think, even last week. The problem for the Chargers is their secondary. It's not their safeties, it's their corners. And Nico Collins was very effective, and they used him very well. And so he was able to make some big plays for this football team as well. So I looked at it all the way around and say, yes. For the Chargers, they're going to be looking for a running back that can stay on the field for 17 games and be able to, be the productive player that I know Coach Harbaugh wants desperately. And so I have a feeling they'll strictly look towards the draft more than free agency, in my gut opinion, just based off of how they've been built and what Joe Ortiz has been able to do there in just a limited amount of time. But they also need another receiver, and they need another tight end. I think the Chargers things are all very fixable, and Justin Herbert's perfectly fine. He had a bad game, didn't play the way he wanted to play. It's disappointing, and give credit to the Houston Texans and their defense, that people didn't give them the credit that they probably deserve, and that they're holding onto their shoulder saying, watch out, Kansas City, we're coming too. So I think that this is a Chargers team that I think the best way to say it is I think the problems are very personnel-driven, fixable, and that's a good thing. And it doesn't mean that the team's a bad team or whatever. It just is, look, they needed another corner or two. They definitely need another receiver, another tight end, and a running back. I think they've got the offensive line, I think, in a good spot. So I like where the Chargers are poised for 2025, but I was really happy for the Texans and D'Amico Ryans, 2 years in a row, win your division, get the playoff victory, be a part of the Final Four, and have a chance. You go play the Kansas City Chiefs. They got to play you. You get to schedule them, and so now we get to go watch it. It's going to be fun.
It's amazing. We talk about Washington, right? Winning for the first time a playoff game in 19 years. And to your point, Mark, the Texans have just done it back-to-back. With a rookie head coach and a rookie quarterback last year, you've gone back-to-back, not just winning the division, but winning a playoff game afterward. I don't think we'd be – if we had said 6 months ago the Texans are in the Final Four of the AFC, nobody would have been surprised. But it's the way that they hit that swoon in the season and then to dig themselves out of it and to still be in the Final Four. That's the bigger surprise for me. Can they really slow down Kansas City, make it a rock fight, keep that score down, and have a puncher's chance at the end?
I actually think they can. And, you know me, I started with the Chiefs. I love the Chiefs. I'm all Kansas City, baby, right? But I just think that they're underrated on defense. I just don't think people really give the Houston Texans enough credit for what they can do or what they can be defensively when they're on point. And yet, still offensively, they're going to have to get Joe Mixon involved. The 100 yards was great for Joe. He hasn't been doing that lately. So, that's going to be – it's a simple one here where this is where you try to play ball control. Don't turn it over. Chew up some clock. Let your defense battle Patrick Mahomes, but try to give Patrick Mahomes only 8 to 10 total chances to go move the ball down the field. That's your goal. You don't want 13 possessions. You need 8 to 10. What does that mean? You got to run the ball, chew up the clock. Those kind of things, I think, was what the Texans really have to do this week if they want a chance to win Kansas City Chiefs. But I think this one's going to be a good game.
And C.J. Stroud is going to have to play well, and he played better last week after a slow start. And again, convert on third down, to your point, Mark, to keep the ball out of 15's hands. That's That's going to be the key if you're CJ Stroud and company. All right, when we come back, major coaching news around the NFL. What's going on in Dallas, too? We'll discuss next here on the GM Show.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
Back here on the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. I'm Dave Ross alongside RGM Mark Dominik. And Mark, the big news, very big news on a Monday morning came out of Dallas. You and I talked about it on VSiN, and then here we are a couple hours later. Big Mike is not walking through that door apparently down there in Jerry World next year. Cowboys and Mike McCarthy deciding to go their separate ways. We know the contract would have expired tomorrow on Tuesday, but I think you and I both thought, hey, they'll get a deal done, and the concern would be the length of the contract. And as we discussed in real time on Monday on the show, it was, well, that would be the only hang-up, that the impasse could happen there, and that could lead to this divorce. Is that the way you read into it, that it was just about the length of the contract, and therefore we're going to go our separate ways?
I got to think it has to be. I mean, certainly it doesn't feel like there's a lot of negotiations going on over the last 24 to 48 hours. And when you get radio silence like that, that's not a great sign, that obviously each camp has their, foot stuck in the ground. I want this or this. And I think Jerry Jones, my gut instinct is Jerry Jones is looking something like Ben Johnson going, I can get Ben to Dallas. We will have the offense we've always wanted to have. We will be a better team. We can keep Mike Zimmer as the defensive coordinator. He can stay on that side of the ball. I mean, to me, Ben Johnson is the prize that I got to think Jerry Jones and the Cowboys are just staring at. And I think that it could be a team that's exciting enough, I think, for Ben to sit there and say, you know what? They do have Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. And, we still can do some more work around this football team. But there's a lot of good pieces here across the board. So I think that that's their prize that they're going to try to look for. Because when you look around the National Football League and say, okay, who else are we going to go to for Dallas? Like, who is the player? And certainly we've seen a lot of names, but I don't think they're going to go a defensive coach because they have Coach Zim. I just don't think they would do that. So now you're going to go to the offensive side of the ball. I don't think Nate Hackett's available, so we got to go for, I'm just joking around, Nate. Don't take that serious. It was just a slight joke. But I don't, who's the offensive coordinator besides Ben Johnson that you're like everyone's fumbling themselves to get to? I just don't know if that, who that actually is. And, seeing Vrabel already come off the board, and we could talk about that, but I think that that's what's going on here. I think the Dallas Cowboys had a number years comfortable. My gut instinct is they sniffed around Ben Johnson. Wait a second. You're telling me you'd come if we're here, and here. We're going to put our foot in the ground and say, Mike, if you want to come, here's the deal. And I have a feeling Mike and his agent were like, well, that seems really wrong or really low, maybe a 2-year deal or something like that. And Mike has enough, I think, people out there that are like, here I am. I'm the Bears. It would be fun to have, what do you think of Caleb Williams? I know you could do a lot of good work here. Or, hey, I'm the Saints, and we got a veteran quarterback you like. And so that's where you've seen those two teams come out rather quickly. But what if Aaron Rodgers wants to play again? What if Mike wants to go to New York with the Jets and reunite, and it feels so good? I have no idea, but those are the spots where you start to think about, like, you could absolutely, maybe it's a good match or a good mix. It's something that, I think all the teams that have a head coach now have suddenly gone, whoa, let's, recircle here and let's get our ducks in a row, because he's a free agent. You don't have to send in a permission form. Now he can go anywhere he wants.
It's so funny because, everybody on social media tell you how bad Mike McCarthy is. And then the second that he's now available on out there, the people that are actually in the know, like you, are like, they're going to reset and go, oh, Mike McCarthy's available? That's different. Like that's the difference between the fake world and the real world, like yourself and actual GMs and owners out there. They know the value of a Mike McCarthy. And some other team's going to be pretty happy to have him next year. All he did in Green Bay was win. He had back-to-back 12-win seasons with the Cowboys. That's hard to do. So I'll be very curious to see where he lands. For the Dallas side, you mentioned Ben Johnson, and I think Cowboy fans would get excited about that. If it's not Ben Johnson, would they actually make a call to prime time down to Colorado? We know Jerry and Dion have a great relationship. Is that something, not to say it would be a fallback, but Bill Belichick sounds like he's not walking, he's going to stay in Carolina from what we're hearing, right? So the other possible Jerry allies that we know he gets along with well, does the end of the list begin and end with Dion if it's not a Ben Johnson?
I don't think so. I just don't think Dion wants to do that. I mean, I think if he's already come out. If I'm going to coach my son, I want to coach my son in the NFL. And the Titans aren't hiring right now, if that's where he ends up. But the Cowboys are so far back with Dak Prescott under contract. I just, it sounds good. It sounds interesting, I guess is the best way to say it, like prime time in Dallas and what would like. But I don't see Jerry Jones going that route. And I don't see the Jones family already not knowing what they're going to do. I can't imagine you would do this and not already have a plan in place of what you're going to do. You're not just going to be like, okay, let's start the coaching search because we're letting Mike go. That is not a Dallas Cowboy mindset, and I have a hard time believing that. I think Jerry and Steven have a plan, and I think that you'll see it come in play pretty quickly. And my gut instinct is it's not prime time.
Well, that's fascinating because what you're basically saying is this isn't Big Mike, saying to Jerry, bye-bye. This is Jerry saying, you know what, we got something else now that we've got cooking. So thank you for your services, and your time in Dallas is no longer needed. Absolutely fascinating, the inside workings.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, I think that they wanted to find something. Like, I think there was a common ground to try to find it. But I think when Jerry had to start looking and Steven had to start looking outside the organization going, what else could we do here? And absolutely you're doing that. You'd be silly not to be doing that. And they probably stumbled upon what they thought was like, well, you know what? I would go that route if we can do that. So let's leave our number where we are. Let's leave the negotiations where they are. If you want to call us back, you can talk to us. No one called each other. Voila, we're moving on. And here we are today. Mike's a free agent. And, that's always kind of fun for a coach just as much for a player.
Mike Vrabel had said that he wouldn't mind coaching the Dallas Cowboys. It was last week. This week, he's the new head coach back home in New England. Had a big press conference today on Monday with Robert Kraft and company. He talked about coming home. I wonder what the rest of that coaching staff will look like for Vrabel now. One of their favorite sons there in New England, helping them win Super Bowls back in the day. What do you make of this move of Vrabel to New England? It feels like it fits. It feels like it should work. Sometimes it's not as easy as that. But on the surface, does this feel like the right move for the Patriot way?
It does. And just like the Dallas Cowboys, I don't think the Kraft family do anything without thinking through it, right? This was a pretty evident decision when they let go of Mayo right after the game, basically, and say, hey, look, we're doing the coaching search. They interview a couple of people quick, get Vrabel in, and boom, it's done, right? And so this is I think, a planned attack by the Kraft family, which is fine. I think that they want the discipline. There's some sarcasm that comes with Coach Vrabel, which is wonderful if you like sarcasm. He's very good at it. You don't know, but you don't know. What you do know is you're going to get disciplined. You're going to get a guy that's super smart, really a really smart football player. It'll be interesting to see who his coordinators end up being. But the more overall picture is, I think they see a guy that obviously me being in Nashville and seeing what he did with the Titans, and sometimes that roster was not where you thought it would be in terms of talent, and then peeling players away. How fast this team's falling apart now to the number one pick. Coach Vrabel makes a difference, and he's had a chance to recharge and reset himself, and he's going back to somewhere very familiar. And I think Patriot fans should be happy today.
It's kind of bizarre because I don't know that I didn't anticipate us talking here on a Monday about a Cowboys vacancy. Now we knew about the Raiders, we knew about the Saints, we knew about the Jets. Right, those three interim jobs are still looking actively for head coaches there. Pete Carroll's going to interview with the Raiders tomorrow. Now that Big Mike's out there, do we expect those guys to land jobs? Are those not out of the four vacancies? Would we expect Pete Carroll and Mike McCarthy to both land jobs, or potentially just one of those type of older coaches that are still trying to get a new team?
Yeah, I mean, I think Mike gets a job. I have a hard time thinking Mike McCarthy doesn't get a job by the end of this. There is a chance that you're interviewing Pete Carroll just to kind of get a sense of the way he looks at your football team. Okay. But maybe not fully thinking that you're going to hire Coach Carroll. And you can't let age be an issue, but you also are trying to hire a coach to have the Harbaugh, Tomlin, Reed effect where they're there for 10, 12, 15 years. That's what you really want to do. No one wants the turmoil and the turnover. And so that is in the back of your mind, I think, for any club as you kind of go through this process. And so my gut instinct is no for Coach Carroll, that he probably won't get a job, but I do think there's a lot of nuggets of knowledge that you can glean from him that you would bring in to be able to understand it and see the different pieces or the way he would attack your football team if he had the chance to.
Yeah, fascinating that with the Bears, the Saints, the Jets and the Cowboys now still on the clock for head coaches. What else is out there? I know that we're talking about Ben Johnson. Obviously, now that window is closed. If you haven't already talked to Ben Johnson, now you have to wait until the Lions season ends. That might not end for multiple weeks if they have their way through a Super Bowl in February, right? So Cliff Kingsbury might be a guy that gets talked to if he wanted to leave DC, if their season ended here. Are there any other coaching? We've heard about Spags maybe looking for a job somewhere for Kansas City. Is that what you get reduced to now for those final four teams that don't have head coaches? That if it's not a Pete Carroll, and maybe Big Mike gets one of those spots, that we're waiting for these teams then to get knocked out to talk to some of their assistants?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a big piece of it. I mean, I think it's interesting. You said that Ben Johnson's pretty much shut down right until after the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
It's very convenient that Dallas would have a chance to sit there and go, well, if we know that we've got him, we don't have to worry about it. Why would Ben Johnson need to talk to anybody? I mean, I think the dots are there. I don't know if I'm seeing a maze or if I'm seeing a problem, but it just seems like it's convenient that Ben Johnson's shut down now. When you think about the Dallas Cowboys today, just walk away from their head coach, and they've got to have a plan in place. Now, again, Cliff Kingsbury absolutely is going to be in play. And like I said at the beginning of this, I thought a lot of these jobs are going to go more offensive and defensive. We'll see how these end up, but I feel like you're going to see a lot more offensive coaches. I think you almost have to have an offensive head coach in Chicago with Caleb. I think you have to. I think the reason it's all defense is only because it's Mike Vrabel. I don't think they were sitting there going, we got to hire a defensive guy. They're hiring Mike Vrabel, and he happens to coach defense. Now it's just getting the right offensive coordinator in there to make sure Drake May moves the way that they expect him to. So I think you're going to see more offensive coaches still get hired in this carousel, but I think Cliff Kingsbury absolutely is in discussions for some of these organizations.
Yeah, no disrespect to the Aaron Glenn's of the world, but it's harder to get those D coordinator jobs to be head coaches than it is those OC guys. Everybody wants those offensive guys, it seems like, at each one of these new teams. So sometimes the defensive guys get forgotten about a little bit. I don't know if that's going to be the case for Aaron Glenn or not. We know that some teams showed interest there as well. All right, when we come back, obviously we're talking about the Monday night game here to round out wildcard weekend. I also want to get your thoughts on what's going on in Cleveland with Deshaun Watson and whether or not we might ever see him suit up, not only for Cleveland, but in the NFL ever again. That's next here on the GM Show.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
We are back on the GM Shuffle presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Dave Ross alongside our GM, Mark Dominik. I don't know, Mark, there's a better person to talk to than you when it comes to figuring out how you position from a front office to your quarterback and maybe some of the language and contracts when you're in a bad one. Cleveland's in a bad one with Deshaun Watson. I don't think anybody's going to dispute that any longer. Injury, off the field, all of it with Deshaun Watson. It has not worked out in Cleveland. We saw that he retore his Achilles. We don't know if he's going to be able to play this year, this calendar year in 2025, again, with the re-tearing of that same Achilles. We don't know if he's ever going to play again physically. How do you now loophole it if you can, if you're the Haslam family? I'm sure Kevin Stefanski would love to be done with this headache once and for all as a head coach. What do you do if you're in that front office for Cleveland and rectify this Deshaun Watson situation?
Well, I mean, obviously this is a major setback and even more significant to a guy that they kind of said, well, we'll figure it out next year and maybe he plays and doesn't. Now the Achilles, there's a lot of things you're going to do. Number one, as a GM, you're certainly going to kind of look into how he ruptured his Achilles, re-ruptured his Achilles. It's a critical part. As soon as you get the news, Andrew Berry should have been on the phone with whoever was doing the rehab, wherever they were. Should have been on the phone with the agent. It should have been on the phone with Deshaun Watson as fast as you can to make sure everything's collaborating and everything's coming together. Because if he did this thing on his own as a non-football related injury and he was being careless or something like that happened, that to me is something you're going to explore with the league office. It's something you're going to explore internally to say, is there a way to, get voids of the guarantees? Is there a way to move financially away from this deal? You're absolutely going to look into that. So that sadly is the business of football, right? I mean, everybody's trying to figure out what's the next leverage or edge, I guess you can find or say. You look at Denver this year, they battled through the Russell Wilson contract and still got to the postseason. Cleveland's looking at it the same way, but if there's a way to get out of this some way, somehow, any of it, all of it, they're going to do that. But I think this is where the Cleveland Browns are. And, I give some credit to ownership. They kept the ship sailing and saying, hey, look, we understand we all signed off for Deshaun Watson, and we all have – that has not worked out. And, it was hard for me to think it would get to this bad for Deshaun Watson when he was on the field. I'm like, it doesn't look like the same guy in Houston ever. But my gut instinct is he's probably played his last snap for at least the Cleveland Browns. I think you're just trying to get him to, assuming that everything's on the up and up, you're just trying to get him healthy to get him out the door. And you're going to eat the cash. You're going to eat the cap. You don't really care about that stuff right now because the salary cap is going up exponentially. It's going to continue to go up, and you're going to have to get through this hump with a younger player and draft well, but draft someone that can, be this team's quarterback of the future. They thought they had it, right? They had 4 quarterbacks going into camp, and everyone's like, why do they have all 4 quarterbacks? And by the end of the year, you're like, where's another quarterback? Can we get a different quarterback? So it was kind of a very frustrating season for, I think, everybody within the organization. And, it hurt Jameis Winston for them to say, hey, look, we don't want to put Jameis out there anymore. That was a really big blow to Jameis Winston's career of whatever that is going to be in the play going forward. It was a lot to be told. So, bad news for Deshaun, but a lot of work ahead for Cleveland, that's for sure.
Whatever decision they end up making, in my time in DC and even during the lockout, what was it, 2010, somewhere in there, 2011, somewhere in there, I did more interviews with DeMar Smith, D Smith, than I ever wanted to, right? But I got to know him pretty well in our felt like daily conversations for a while in DC. Does this have NFLPA written all over it? Whatever happens here, if he's released, if it feels like this is going to be some sort of the union picks up for Deshaun and fights on behalf of the player. Could you see a scenario dragging out like that?
Yeah, I'm sure they would. I mean, they would be, they'd have to. They'd want to kick, scream, and fight to say, hey, this is a fully guaranteed contract, and it was important that we got this one, and let's not let this thing fall apart. So I would think the union, certainly the NFLPA, would be on the side of Deshaun, trying to figure out, again, taking the carpet for the horse. But our producer, Elliot, was like, isn't it hard to roll your ankle when you've got a walking boot on? I'm like, that's a really good point. And so you got to kind of figure all those things out. So, I mean, I think the Browns are huddled up today. I mean, I think they're talking through it and looking from a legal aspect, what can they do? And it's all internal. And then once they figure out exactly what they think they can do, they will run it through 345, see if they see it's the same way, and then they'll run it to wherever the next steps. But I think, again, because of the injuries, the performance, overall, I think it's better for Cleveland now to just say, hey, look, whenever he gets healthy, assuming everything's, again, on the up and up, as soon as day one is that he passes their physical, I think they just let him go or move on. And really, if they own the whole contract anyway, it doesn't really matter.
We're going to see a game tonight. I don't know that we'll see these two quarterbacks in their places next year. Look, I don't want Matty Stafford to retire, but I don't know how much longer he's going to end up playing. His wife always seems like every offseason she wants him to shut it down. We don't know about Sam Darnold, whether or not he's going to be back in Minnesota, if J.J. McCarthy is going to be the guy. It does, when you look at it in that lens, kind of in the future lens, it's kind of fascinating to think that maybe we don't see these guys in these respective uniforms anymore. How do you shape up that quarterback battle tonight in Arizona? Is it the guy that makes the least mistakes that wins, or no, we got to take chances? And that's Stafford's done it throughout his career, and sometimes Darnold does, and it's to the demise of the team. But do you think we see those quarterbacks take their usual shots tonight?
I think you will. I think you've got to throw the ball at JJ. I think that's critical, to be able to push the ball down the football field and use your best weapon and let him go win on one-on-one matchups. I mean, this is what he's there is to say, hey, look, you can't stop this guy. And I don't know if the Rams have an answer for that very good, at least. But, you obviously both teams want to find a way to run the football and things like that. But for Sam Darnold, I think this is important. He knows how much pressure's on this game, let alone it's a playoff game. You just came off a rough game, but you know how much free agency is going to look and what that's going to mean. And you certainly want to put your best foot forward and show that I can, win a postseason game, because that's going to be another big check for these clubs that are all looking around saying who's going to bite on Sam Darnold and what kind of number we're going to give him. So this is a big game for him. For Matt Stafford, I don't know how much longer he wants to play. He may want to play 2 more years. He may not. I've kind of talked about it here before. It's like I could see, Matt Stafford, depending on how things go, say, hey, look, I'm done, or I'm leaving, or, I want to raise and they don't come to it. And then, suddenly now the Rams are looking for a quarterback. And, maybe Aaron Rodgers heads out there. There's just lots of different things that are going to be moving parts. But I think tonight, the main thing that you're trying to do is I think it's hitting the other opponent's quarterback. And I think the more uncomfortable either quarterback feels or looks, I think that will determine the outcome of the game, because I just think that it's that simple. It's, can you get to the opponent's team's quarterback and make him make a mistake? And I think you'll see that it just takes one in a playoff game where I think these teams are pretty evenly matched. It just takes one of those kind of mistakes where you sit there and go, okay, that should be the play that could really kind of catapult this team to a victory.
I don't know that we ever looked at Matthew Stafford, say 3-4 years ago before they won the Super Bowl and thought his career was done. But there was a point, I think people have forgotten, that it was teetering, right? That maybe, it's the back nine, if you will. And I don't know what hole he would have been on, but clearly he's extended that longer than people thought. If it did look bad for Sam tonight, and it comes off the bad performance against Detroit with the number 1 seed on the line, would that almost be a precursor for other teams to say, you know what? I don't want him starting on my new team next year, whatever team that is. And it would make it easier to move on to JJ McCarthy. I hope Sam doesn't feel that pressure, but that is a reality, right? That if it really looked bad, if that result looks that bad, that's the determining factor for other teams.
Yeah, no, I think it is. I think it's a real thing where you could sit there and say, if it's bad, it gives you pause. And I've talked about this with Sam Darnold all along. I think if you hire Sam Darnold, you have to bring the offense with him. I think you want to keep him in that same offense and get the same type of results that they've been able to get for most of the season. But a loss here and a bad performance, it's hard for me. Like, again, Dave, if you guys didn't have Dak Prescott and knew he was coming back next year, and you could sign Sam Darnold, you'd be like, okay, we're fixed there. We're good. Let's go. You'd be like, I think so. I don't think GMs aren't thinking the same thing. They're like, I think so. They want to believe that. You're certainly going to want to try to that. But I think it's kind of a group package. But I think it's important for Sam to play well. He doesn't have to play dynamic. He doesn't have to be, Mr. Wonderful or whatever you want to say. But he certainly has to, shake off from what happened last week and put this team in a position where it's the fourth quarter and they got a chance to win the game.
Yeah, I don't even know how many how many starting quarterback spots there are in that quarterback carousel, right? It feels like there's more head coaching spots right now, potentially, than there are starting quarterback jobs out there next year. So, I'm rooting for the guy. I hope he plays well tonight. And then the question is moot, but we'll find out what a difference 24 hours is going to make through the lens of this game tonight here. And again, the winner will move on to Philadelphia. The loser will be cleaning out their lockers. Next week, quarterbacks we don't worry about: Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. And I'm sure the league, you can't get a whole lot better on for Park Avenue for NFL revenue watching these two guys next week. It's the future and it's the present of the NFL, the elite quarterbacks here. Is this everything the league could hope for and more in this showcase matchup next week?
Oh yeah, I mean it's a great matchup. I think any NFL fan, whether you're a fan of the Chargers or you're a fan of the Seahawks, you're like, well, that's going to be a good game. I'm going to want to watch that. It should have a tremendous rate. It should be exactly what you're looking for. And you made the point, right? You look at these teams and you see C.J. Stroud, you see Mahomes, you obviously, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. In the AFC, it's loaded up. Jared Goff, he's going to be in the postseason. He's had the nice big years. I mean, when you consistently see the teams that have, Jaden Daniels, what he put down on tape this year is, tremendous. And so when you see these teams, you say the one thing that's always attached to it is a pretty good quarterback. And yet I think in the AFC, you've got 4 quarterbacks that I think could all host the Lombardi Trophy at some point. And I think that's a huge, huge thing. In the NFC, we'll see who wins tonight, how this all plays out. But certainly you look at Detroit, you hard time. Hurts, Jaden Daniels, it feels like a guy that could host the Lombardi one day based off of what he's been able to accomplish in 1 year. So, we still got the game tonight, and, Stafford's already hosted it once. So, you got to have that guy, and clearly these teams have that guy, and that's what we're all looking for. That's why every year at the draft, the boards keep moving up, because if you don't have that guy, you realize it's a long season.
It's amazing that this time next year or at the beginning of next year, you can look at the NFC East and say the Commanders have the quarterback I'd want out of all 4. And then that's how quickly it flips when you see what Jaden Daniels is doing in year 1, and he'll be back in the spotlight against Detroit, the number 1 seed next week. Mark, always appreciate the insight, my friend. Great stuff as always. Thanks for hopping on the GM Shuffle.
Yeah, enjoyed it. Enjoy the game tonight, and looking forward to more playoff football coming ahead.
And we'll talk about it on Thursday when we get back together here for the next edition of the GM Shuffle. We'll see you then, everybody. Enjoy the games. We'll see you on Thursday.